So, and what this session is about, that I'm your game show host for, is we have people in charge of the journals that publish the stuff that we geeks do. And I've got some provocative questions I want to ask them to challenge them, because you guys are failing, because the world is going to hell despite all the great technology you're publishing. Even she's pissed. Okay, so how do we evolve what we do as engineers, scientists, policy people, blah, 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 and how do we communicate it better to fix the place? That's going to be the theme of the challenge. And what I'd like to do is have each of our panelists introduce themselves, and then I'll ask some provocative questions. We'll have them all answer, and then you guys ask them, call them on the carpet about it, and then some free form. Is that groovy? And I can say groovy because I grew up in LA on the beach, so I'm allowed to say that. Excellent. Okay, so go ahead and introduce yourselves while I open up my little provocative questions.
My name is Jinyue Yan. So I'm editor-in-chief Applied Energy. In fact, that's the conference, this one. We are the main organizer together with MIT.
So be nice.
Yeah. So I'm a professor in Royal Institute of Technology and also another university, Mälardalen University in Sweden. So I'm working in the energy professor. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yes, in order, right? Birol Dindoruk. I'm chief scientist in Shell and also adjunct faculty for University of Houston and Stanford. And I'm editor-in-chief for Journal of Natural Gas Science and Engineering, JNGCE, basically. This is my third EIC job, I would say, so addicted, I guess.
Yeah. I'm Brandon. I'm an editor at Joule, which is publishing right from Cell Press, which is a publishing company just down the road. And I'm the only one today on this panel who is a full-time editor, so I have a slightly different experience.
My name is Dr. Aoife Foley. I'm a reader in Queen's University, Belfast in Northern Ireland, and I'm the editor-in-chief of Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews. I've completely different opinions to everybody else, because I worked for 12 years in industry before I did my PhD when I was pregnant, and I had 2 babies and didn't take any annual leave or go away and find myself in a bunch of flowers. And got married, and now I'm a reader, as I said. I was recently a lecturer, so I've only been promoted. So I'm very happy with that. I get an extra few bob, a bit of money. And I am interested in publishing interesting work. I don't care who you are, where you're from. I'm just interested in publishing interesting work. And that's basically what I'm about.
Fantastic. All right, the first question for our panelists, drum roll. What is the best mix, or how do you decide, of theoretical focus papers versus very much applied papers that will help fix the planet? You know, how do you set the tone for the journal? The purely theoretical versus here's something we had hypothesized on, we ran the experiment, here's the data. Jerry, why don't you take we'll just go right down the road.
Yeah, okay.
What's your idea?
I was told I'm supposed to give some, that's why my slide is there, but it's okay.
Yeah,
but
we're gonna do that first?
Yeah,
but it's fine. I think we can discuss. Applied energy is applied energy. So we basically, our scope, if you ask me what kind of article you like, it's energy with applied nature.
So in the next 3 to 5 years, it should be usable.
Wow, it's useful. Might be not only next to 5 or 3 or 5 years. It could be 10 years. Okay. Might be 20 years. But at least it should be useful, not just like I'm doing self-satisfaction and do just by myself. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, the journal that I'm heading is Science and Engineering, so they are equally valuable. I guess it's, at the end of the day, to me, it's like chicken and egg, actually. You need to have theory and framework so that you can do the application. And application part of these things are not easy. They apply to what? Industry scale or academic scale or just to get a PhD. So it's a wide spectrum of things. Industry application is going to be, whether we like it or not, is going to be limited because it's going to flow in the direction of capital. Somebody has to put money and make a living with it. So I'm pragmatic if I categorize a particular paper in that dimension, but equally open for theoretical things as long as it's new.
Yeah. So we need to solve the energy crisis 20 years ago. So I think we need pretty much every tool we have possible working for new ideas, new concepts, new solutions, new devices and systems to solve it. And that includes both new ideas from the theory side and then things that are very applied, and very importantly, things that bridge those two together. So I weight all of these things as highly important tools in our toolbox that we can use to work towards solving the energy crisis.
Well, from my own perspective, I believe actually a lot of the technologies exist and they've been around for the last 20 or 30 years. And in reality, what we need to do is we need to get people communicating with each other who actually know how to put them in the field, to make the business case, to make the environmental case, to put the whole of the policies, the regulatory requirements in place to facilitate the electricity market models at the retail scale to really, it's really per se, there's not an energy crisis. What we have is we have an environmental crisis. And that's what I'm interested in. I suppose if you wanted to use a buzzword or buzzwords plural, it would be the Sustainable Development Goals of the United Nations. But if I wanted to go back to real basics, I think the heart of it is the Brundtland report, which was the first leap or the step of all of this, and the three key E's or the three pillars of sustainability, which to me is a word that's been banjaxed around and hijacked by people who know very little about sustainability. And when I hear people talking about human resources and sustainability in employment situations, I begin to get worried, because actually it means the environment, it means economics, and it means equity for all over the world, okay? So somebody in America who's driving a 3 or a 4 litre, stupid, crazy car that they don't need to drive, okay? Yeah, a bit of a muscle car. Or somebody who's in a developing country in South America or Africa should have the same opportunity to have access to transport, and nobody should be penalised in any country in the world in terms of their emissions, in terms of the fuel sources that they are using. So that's what I'm trying to publish in my journal in relation to what I'm interested in doing. And this relates to my experiences in industry. Working for Siemens, working for the Electricity Supply Board in Ireland, and working for a development company where we rolled out or built out a lot of wind farms. Okay?
Fantastic. And now let me recover on my faux pas on the format. And now we'll go back to if everyone each has a slide deck for you guys to each do a slide deck. So I'm going to backpedal and say that was a great question. Introduce them all so they can now do their slides. So Jerry, go ahead and take.
Come there. Yeah, I was told that we should give roughly some slides. Where's the?
There should be a clicker.
Okay, here.
Let me get my glasses out of the way. Sorry.
Yeah, that's in fact back to your question. What we are going to publish, I believe it's the journal is not only journal. It's a society or it's a community. That's why I call it, we try to build applied energy as an innovation ecosystem. And we are engineers working with, for example, with chemistry or biology, and in which with each author is roughly kind of element. We want to have reaction. That's why reaction is not only chemical reaction rather than reaction. That's what makes something happen. So that's what we try to do through the applied energy. And I will go through quickly, but not this is scope. I will already say what we are going to publish. Enter with the applied. So let's see if I can go back. Oh, yeah. I'm trying. In fact, I would like to talk not about the journal, rather than beyond. So it's not only the journal, what we are doing beyond that, but in fact, myself is not like in-house public editor, rather than I'm a scientist. So the professor is my mostly the hobby is my journal editor. So that's why I'm talking about the others. That's our authorship. So the worldwide, roughly 15,000 around, and so over 100 countries from different, from the author. In fact, it's a very wide coverage. China is number 1, US number 2. So that's quite linked to this CO2 emission, right? So we are dealing with energy issues. So that's our editorial board, roughly 18 people or nearly 100. And in fact, the journal is very old. It started in 1975. So I started 2007. I've been working for 11 years or nearly 12 years. So that's afterwards we have made some change. And when I started, I received 200 manuscripts per year. So now we receive more than 200 per week. So that's the change of the submission, and of course, the rejection rate become a little bit higher. So that's our published from 100 per year. Now it's 1,600 last year. And if you look submission, it's a significant increase. That's why we have a little bit higher rejection rate. I'm sorry if our reader you get rejected, but it's not. But I'm sure you support us with try to improve the quality. And as the downloads, we have last year reached to the 4.6 million downloads. In fact, as we made a lot of money, not us. We are scientists always for. So it's and that's the impact factor. I started roughly 1, and now it's 7.9. And so we wait for next month will be new. That's something figure of the applied energy. I already mentioned some about the impact factor and downloads. We are different ranking. You have in addition to the impact factor, and also we have a site score that's a Scopus based. And we are ranked in energy and some others. We are the first one. Applied energy is in the Google Scholar in the top 100 of journals. So we are in the 91, yes. And also you have another system, the ESI, the Essential Science Index, or the highly cited paper or hot paper. We are ranking in number 4 in all 500 engineering journals in terms of the ESI or ISI. So that's, in addition to the journal, that's the way we build the community to working together, including this symposium and working with, and then we have other, like Unilabs. I'm going to go quickly what's Unilabs, which I started 2 years ago, and which kind of virtual lab working together. And we have the ISET, the International Clean Energy Talent Program. We have 5 or 6 students or members in the first group. So we are running 3 phases. First one is 14.3, second 14.7, and this year will be 14.9 with the postdoc above, even some professors, but young, under 45. And then we have some school for our young students, and this topic-based symposium includes this one. This is the first try in US. And we have an annual conference. We'll be in Sweden this year, about 1,000 people participate, a little bit larger than this one. And then we have a kind of new product called the Progress in Applied Energy. We are going to spin off next year, 2020, maybe another journal. And we say but we will select roughly 3% from the applied energy. It's very few. Okay, that's the conference we had last year, and the annual conference and some topic-based conference. This is what we, okay. We are here, and that's this symposium. And then we have an annual conference in Sweden in August, so you are welcome to join us. And then we have a low carbon city and the urban energy system. It's a topic-based. It's similar as this MIT A and B. So we are working with 3 levels. One is the scientists, professors, and the leading scientists. This is the Unilab. And we have postdoc and the young scientist program is the ISET. And then the summer school for the PhD student, even younger. So that's 3 levels. We try to working with the network applied energy, so-called innovation ecosystem. That's the summer school we had last year. And that's the ISET. So far we have been quite link to the international different kind of universities as a supervisor together. And now our students, we have students here in Harvard, in Princeton, and some other university, and also, of course, in Europe, Oxford, and even in my university too. That's the ISET. And the Unilab, that's something which we created 2 years ago. And the motivation why we started, I just leave this slide a little bit longer, you can read it. Because we have a chance to meet, but that's not enough. We are just discussing communication, but we do need to working together. That's a so-called meeting and the meeting, a little bit different concept. That's in fact, we try to use a Wikipedia concept, similar like our scientists not only working together because of money, because we have money together, then we will search for money together. And we want to promotion might be we try to work and support each other. But original, more important is our research interest as a scientist and why we can work in together without this kind of other material interest. So that's what we are trying to work in. And start with the Unilab. And now we have 10 topic-based virtual laboratory. That's what we call the Unilabs. And we try to working with so-called research innovation without borders. The border can be different disciplinary and can be different countries or different type of people. And so that's what each color has one Unilab. That's 10. So far we have 10. I just give some quickly one example, say what's those 10. Okay, that's one synergy between the energy network. You can immediately just lead across disciplinary. This is started with the European Commission project. We're working together, then we say why we can continue working together, even if the project finished. That's why I start what we call the number zero. And then we continue working with some other topics like distributed energy and microgrid. You do say the Tianjin University in China, and Sweden, which is my university, and also the Canada University of Victoria, and Lawrence in US, and some even industry are involved. Those kind of different topics you can find like energy and water issues, hydrate, and I just go due to time, link to the industry, efficiency improvement, and also mitigation, and the biomass, bioenergy, and smart grid market. That's not only technology, even linked to the business and the market issues. And this is linked to the biogas production base, the database, because people need to work together to develop tools and the database. And water energy nexus, and if you look, this is a very wide. Beijing University, Tsinghua University, and Sweden, and also the Cambridge, IASA in Austria, and also Maryland and MIT. I don't know what's the MIT here in the partner, and some others. That's the number 9. In fact, that's the 10th Unilabs we have so far has been established. So you do say we try to working more like help our scientists working together, use our energy as a platform. So that's my last slide. So working together, try to say, can we work in through Unilabs, through Applied Energy Network, say research and do some research innovation without borders. That's what we tried. Working together, use the Applied Energy as a platform, not only in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we heard how the journal is trying to now build networks of people, and then I guess then also then provide the network and a means to then publish the juicy stuff that can come out.
Oh yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Okay, so now Birol, would you like to come up and you have a slide deck already loaded up, I presume? No?
Should be.
I think that.
You don't? Do you have a thumb drive or something we can?
Yeah.
You know.
As a matter of fact, I need to load it from my laptop. It's not here yet.
Well,
I emailed it to.
Maybe we can switch.
I go next.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Go next.
Then I'll do it, yeah.
All right. All right, well, Dr. Foley will now go then. Well, Birol, you load yours up
Go ahead.
next.
Mine should be there.
Okay. Take it away.
Will I use this mic or this mic? Or? Go anywhere. Okay. Well, just to say who I am again, I'm Dr. Aoife Foley. I'm a reader in Queen's University, Belfast. There's not many readers around anymore. So I suppose you don't know the title, do you know?
I think it's like a research scientist. Is that
No.
I don't know. Maybe you should.
It's a professor without a chair, so I'm waiting for somebody to die. So it's a recognition of my research, because I only graduated, as I said, with my PhD in 2011. Okay? So, in terms of the journal, I love emojis. The mission of the journal is basically, it's to bring together the research community, the private sector, policy and decision makers. So you can be a geographer, you can be a historian, you can be an educator, you can be a scientist, you can be an engineer, you can be a lawyer, an economist. So from any of the humanities, any of the fields. And we're trying to, and that's why people don't understand why we have such a high desk reject rate in renewable and sustainable energy reviews. The reason being is, if a journal paper doesn't have an intellectual discussion or proper conclusions, really that paper isn't the right paper for this journal. Okay, so that's sort of the golden nugget that I'm going to share with everybody today. In terms of the aim of the journal, as I said, it's the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change is the aim, and it's to support the Sustainable Development Goals. So there's a bit of a myth out there that we only publish review articles. That's actually incorrect. 40% of our papers are original research articles. So the types of papers we produce are reviews, original research articles, a type of article called a case study, which is where somebody's talking about, something that's really, it's been done. So they're looking at, an AD plant at a landfill, or they're looking at a microgrid on an island, or some PV in a diesel set in a developing country. And what they're talking about is how they actually got this project together, how we can learn from it, where we can replicate it, and how it can become modular, okay, and what lessons we can learn from that. We have editorials associated with special issues predominantly. We have expert insights, which are commissioned mini reviews and thereby invitation only. And cutting edge, they're mini original research articles, maybe 1,500 words, 1,800 words. There again, by invitation only. Thank you very much. So the themes, in terms of all the topics we cover, are the applications, so building, industry and transport, energy resources, the environment, educations, energy systems, sustainability as a concept, the techno-economic social aspects, and utilisation. But the key thing here all the time is the link must be very, very clear to renewable and sustainable energy. And where people miss out on this is they give me a title where it's linked to renewable, sustainable energy in the scope of the journal. The abstract is sort of worded so that if you run it through the checker to find a journal, it looks like it's going to fit the scope of the journal, and maybe the first paragraph in the introduction. But then from there on in, it should maybe be a paper that would be better suited to Jerry's Applied Energy, the Journal of Cleaner Production, Energy or Renewable Energy, or even indeed Science or Nature Energy. So the journal was founded in 1997. The guy I took over from was Larry Kazmersky, Kaz, from National Renewable Energy Laboratories in Boulder in Colorado, NREL. It's an English language journal. It publishes 12 issues in hard copy every year, which is unusual these days. Most journals don't do it anymore. And the reason why that is because it goes to the UN libraries around the world, which is unusual in this instance. So I actually met Larry first in 2009 via an email about something. He contacted me and I emailed him back. It was the second year in my PhD. And then he was in a conference in London and he said, will you come over? That was 2011. And we went for lunch and he said to me, look, do you want to get involved in the journal? And I said, yeah, Larry, I'd be delighted. So I started off as editor, an associate editor. And then Larry emailed me and said he was going to be retiring in an X number of years, and would I be interested in becoming co-editor-in-chief with him? And that's what I did. We're not as big a ship as Applied Energy. We've 10 associate editors, and I believe we've about 30 editorial board members. They're representative of all the different sort of fields and disciplines, and the editorial boards are experts in their field, both from industry and academia. So there's a mix. So in terms of our downloads, I suppose we're up in the 6 million downloads. We're represented all over the world. Again, I'd say China, India would be the biggest, then the United Kingdom, Spain, predominantly Europe, and then the US. Our numbers aren't as high in the US as I would wish them to be, but the papers we get are traditionally or typically from the universities that would be the top universities or the research laboratories, okay? So in terms of our site score, it's 10.54. In terms of the impact factor, it's 9.184. Next year, it's going to go over 10. Our SNP is 3.59. And my motto in terms of journals, you know, is that just because you have a high impact factor, the law of gravity always doesn't apply. Okay, so you just need to be careful of that, because some journals can have an indeed higher impact factor, and that's historical due to the way the journal was set up and the journal that it was originally linked to. Okay, so you just need to be a bit wary of that. And sometimes you'll be publishing in a journal as an academic or a researcher where it actually will not have a very high impact factor, but it's a better journal for your discipline. Okay, like the Royal Society of Chemistry, the IEEE Transactions on Power Systems, or Renewable Energy. So you must find the right fit. Don't be just following impact factors. It's not really suitable or appropriate in the long term. Now, I know in certain countries this is what they're crazy about. And in the United Kingdom, we have the REF exercise, and indeed, they're also crazy about publishing in high impact factors. But my own belief is when you want to reach the people you want to reach, you must do it through the right medium, okay? So in terms of our ranking, you know, there's 365 journals in my field in the renewable energy sustainability area, and our journal is number 8, and really the only one that would be comparable above me would be Nature Energy. But to me, Nature Energy is a very, very different journal. It has a full-time staff. And it's more like a newspaper. So what it's doing is it's publishing interesting and controversial things, or things that need to get out there fairly quickly. So they'd have a different sort of approach to what I'd have. So all the papers that come into the journal, they all go through me. So I get 100 papers a week, okay? And then I delegate them amongst the 8 or the 10 associate editors. The reason I do this is I want to make sure that the journal paper and the paper gets very good attention. So sometimes I may take a paper where the English isn't very good. I know it'll take a number of revisions or iterations, but it's an interesting paper and it has something that's very useful for people to know. So I'll email authors personally and say, look, I want you to go away and work on your English. And then they'll go away and they'll send it to Elsevier, where they do this sort of editing service. But what I say to everybody is, get a native English speaker who's a scientist or an engineer or an academic who's used to writing in English to proofread your paper. Because do you know what? An editing service is not checking the scientific robustness of the English. And that's very, very important. So sending it off to somebody, and actually it's better if you improve the English yourself, because you want to make a career writing papers. So I always say to the students that I email, or postdocs, or even professors in other universities who want to move from their country to another country, I said, take your time. Rome wasn't built in a day. You know, this academia game, it's not a sprint. It's not, you know, you're not going to be Usain Bolt. You're not going to be doing the sort of lightning sound. This is a marathon, you know, and it depends on where. Do you want to be remembered for quality work, or do you want to be remembered as a flash in the pan? Okay, and that's what you need to think about. So in terms of the people who, you know, the sort of 9 points that I'd like to make is read the scope. So I get a lot of emails from academics from all over the world, and undergraduates and postgraduates, masters, PhDs, even people in industry, EU people who are doing projects from the US, and people email me and they say, you know, is this idea, and there's 2 or 3 sentences, or would this paper be suitable? Really, until I see the paper, I can't tell you. So you're actually wasting your time sending me an email like that. I typically get about 50 to 60 emails every week. I try to answer most of them. And sometimes I might just go reply and go scope and refer them to the link on the web page, because I don't have enough time to sort of personalize everything, but I try to be as polite as possible. I always refer them to the guide for authors. Okay, so I'm an engineer. I worked as applied, worked in industry. You know, when you're doing an environmental impact statement, or you're doing a HAZOP, or you're doing licensing, you're filling in a form, you're doing it in a certain way. And the reason why I want it done according to the guide for authors, not do it your own way, is because the reviewers that we have, I want to train them in to be good reviewers. Okay? I don't want a whole load of reviewers who just give me back 2 sentences and say, accept this paper because it's a good paper. That's nonsense. That's an editorial decision. Okay? And any paper that makes its editorial decision on such a sort of comment, really, you know, it's not a qualitative piece of work. So make a contribution. So the word that you never see me using is novelty. Okay? Novelty is something that you get in a lucky bag, or you read in a comic. Okay? What we're interested in robust pieces of work. What do I mean robust? Something that somebody can stand over and it holds water. It's correct. Okay? Now, some pieces of work, they may not be correct. It's only an indication because you're modeling something. And the parameters can be very, very different in very different situations. So people argue about these things, but that's science. Okay? And we must have an open debate about it. So be unique. What do I mean by unique? Say things that are interesting in your paper and that are relevant. Be meticulous, so check your work. I'm looking for, you know, what are the limitations of your work? What would you do, or what would you have done differently to improve the work so somebody can carry it on for you? They're the things that are relevant, okay? Reach out as well as in. So when you're doing your discussion, the purpose of an introduction is to help you with your discussion. So you must compare your results and your findings with the work of others. It's not just to sort of say, this is my results, this is what I found, 5% higher or 2% higher. Don't try to make everything fit. So don't try to fit the journal, like all these guys fitting in the minivan, okay? So, you know, people get bogged down in the paperwork. The title is very, very important. Don't try to make it too broad. Some people try to make their title broad. The title should say exactly what the paper does. Make sure you've all the keywords. Students rush their paper when they're submitting it. They don't even think about the keywords. The keywords will get you your reviewers in the Scopus system. The keywords will get you your search, pull up your paper in Scopus for others to read. The classifications are actually for the editorial purpose. Okay, so don't put down one classification. Your paper's about wind energy, but what exactly about wind energy? Is it storage in wind? Is it the economics of wind? You know, is it computational fluid dynamics? Be precise. Say what it is, because then it makes my job easier. Have good highlights. Highlights should maybe have 2 at least. It's usually 4 or 5 highlights that have numbers in them. When I don't see numbers or something with a number or something that we can learn from, I get a bit panicky. Put your work in context. Avoid padding. So what do I mean by padding? Don't be putting in rubbish, or don't be putting in stuff that's from a book or from something else. Okay? Don't do lump referencing. So there's no point in referencing the whole mother and the planet. So 15 or 20 people wrote a similar paper. Pick the best paper. Pick the paper that's the most relevant for your work. The discussion must be well written, and the key findings must be relevant to the field and the scope of the journal. And suggest realistic reviewers. Don't pick Jerry. He's never going to review your paper, okay? Because he's too bloody busy, okay?
I'm reading that one.
I know. I'm reading everybody else's. You don't have to be reviewing papers, okay? I try to review, and this is a thing that also worries me. I try as a minimum to review 1 paper a week minimum. Now, typically, I will do maybe 2 to 3 a month, okay? Because it's very important. Don't expect to get published if you're not reviewing. Okay, so it's like payback. What goes around comes around. If you don't review, you're never going to learn, because you're going to see what other people are doing, and you're going to see what other people think of other people's work. Read the scope, as I said, if you want to become a reviewer. Read how to review, not an opportunity to recommend irrelevant papers. So some people use it as an opportunity to recommend their own papers. You know, and don't think I'm going to reject your paper because, you know, you've decided not to accept, you know, this guy's recommendation of his 5 stupid papers that have no relevance to your piece of work. It's confidential material. Structure your review. Use the checklist, and your recommendation informs the editorial decision. It doesn't accept or decline. I've actually accepted papers where reviewers recommended reject our major revisions, even on the 3rd revision, because the person actually, as we say in Ireland, was taking the piss. Okay, so taking the mick. Okay, he was trying to delay the paper. Okay. So sometimes I'd be very cynical about people who keep on looking for major revisions. Yeah? So after you review, collect your rewards. And what do I mean like that? There's certificates. There's free access to Scopus when you're doing it for Science or any of those journals, or Springer. There's the equivalent. And I have bits and pieces with all of those, including the IEEE. So I want to ask a really serious question now in relation to reviewing, because it's very important, because we're meant to be collegiate. We're meant to help each other out. Academia isn't like being a politician, okay? You don't have to stab somebody in the neck or in the back to get ahead. How many people honestly review in the room? I do. That's good, okay? Now, who are PhD students or postdocs? Now, how many of you review, and take down your hand if you don't? Okay, so you need to review, yeah? Okay. Now, obviously, typically when I go to other universities, this is MIT, I would expect that you would be reviewers. But when I go to some universities, no hands go up. Okay? Yeah. So this is the time, and this is a thing. It's not about quantity, it's about quality. And I have this cartoon here to explain this. This is the time when the university started to rank our research by the number of publications, not the quality of the publications. Okay? So it's us as academics to push back from this kind of shite from people, okay? We're the university, not the administrators, okay? So when you're dealing with your grant agency, you need to say to them, well, actually, hang on a second, that's really stupid. You know, because do you know what? Einstein only wrote, how many papers? Was it 1? Okay, yeah, he wrote his thesis and he wrote 1 paper. Yeah? It's a good one, exactly. Yeah? So that's what I'm saying, okay? Don't get carried away with being a paper machine. I had a colleague who was on maternity leave, and she wrote 9 journal papers. I was breastfeeding, and I actually was writing something as well, but I wrote 1 paper and breastfed, okay? So the thing about it is papers, yeah? They're like, a paper like Einstein's is like a mythical creature, yeah? It's like a unicorn. So whether he was awesome or not, I don't know, yeah? But there's one thing about it, is when you get it, make sure that everybody knows about it. So if you have a really good piece of work or a good paper, and you've noticed it's getting a few citations, start emailing it to people. Now, I never did that. I've 1 paper, it has a load of citations, which is very unusual. It nearly has 1,000 citations as an engineer, okay? But I've noticed now, recently, I get sent these papers, oh, this is my paper, there's loads of citations. Now, I wouldn't say it like that. I'd say, this is my paper. It might be useful for your work. Maybe we could collaborate on something that's parallel or complementary to it. So collegiality is very important to me, and that's why I went back to become an academic. I wanted to work with people who were interested in problem solving, developing new methods, new approaches, new formula, new whatever. I don't care. But I suppose, you know, when you're a researcher, before you go to university or grad school, you say to yourself, I can do whatever I want. And then you become the professor. When a researcher, when you're in grad school, you know, I'll do whatever my researcher or my professor wants me to do. And then you're on the tenure track. And then you get old and nobody cares. And I'm waiting for a few of these feckers to die at the moment. And then I'm going to research whatever I want when you're hanging around up in Harvard. And then I'm going to research in peace when you're dead. So the thing about it is, don't be bought into this as young academics, okay? Don't be bought into this, yeah? No matter whether somebody is old or young, sometimes actually, just because you're old doesn't mean you're wise, okay? Just be careful of that. So, issues. The issues that I sort of come across as an editor-in-chief of Renewable and Sustainable Energy Reviews is that the authors don't read the scope, they don't read the guide for authors, they don't even read the information on Elsevier's electronic submission system. So they tick all the boxes quickly, and then when they get into trouble for ethics or plagiarism or something stupid to do with a figure for copyright, I didn't know, okay? So it's like going in for an exam. Read what you're signing, read what you're doing. Don't be ticking all the boxes like a fool. You're not a fool, you're a very clever person. Authors don't read ethics policies, they don't understand the rules on copyrights. And then the other issue, as I said, is time bandits. So silly queries, you get them. And then these people who complain about the fact that you rejected their paper. Now, I've rescinded in the last 2 years 15 editorial decisions that I made. Because what I did was, my gut instinct was saying, oh, this paper isn't great, there's something wrong with it. But what I did was I went away and I contacted somebody else via email when the person complained, who would be an expert in this field. And I said to him, could you do me a favor? Could you take a look at this paper? I don't want you to review it, and I just want you to give me a paragraph or a few sentences on your gut feelings. I don't give them the reviews of the other people at all, okay? And then that person will inform my decision. And sometimes if they come back to me with a vague answer, then I might say to them, well, will you go away and review it for me now, would you mind? And I'll email them the PDF and I'll say, this is highly confidential. And then they'll come back to me and they'll give me their opinion on it. And I've rescinded, as I said, a number of decisions over that, in that situation. So don't argue as well. I get some younger academics. I had some guy from Italy recently. He was in a dialogue conversation of about 16 emails with me. He drove me mad because I was trying to make the Sunday dinner for my husband and family and my parents. And he kept on emailing me. He was so angry. And actually, I went off and I obliged him. I knew there was something wrong with the paper. I obliged him and I got one of the top guys in the field in the world in Portugal to look at it. He came back to me and he said the same thing. And then what happened was I did a little bit of homework then with Elsevier, and it transpired he actually had that journal paper in 2 journals under review at the same time, and it had been rejected from the others. Now, you're not allowed to do that. And when you sign the form to submit your paper, it actually says in an EES. So, multiple email queries. So to me, to my colleagues, to Elsevier, stop doing that. If you were working for me in Siemens, when I had staff doing that for me, I'd actually take you into the office and I'd say, will you stop annoying everybody? Just send an email query to one person. You don't have to ask 5 people. Don't be asking about templates, Read the bloody webpage. Multiple EES accounts. This is a big problem for some people. So they have 3 or 4 EES accounts. So that's our sort of electronic system. I don't think you use that now anymore, do you, Jerry? Yeah, I do as well. EVISE is the other one.
Worse.
Okay, that's worse. But they have more systems. We were lucky we escaped that. So the ethics. So the thing, people get hung up on Turnitin and Crossref. These plagiarism checkers. It's not a number, guys. Okay? So a paper may be a preprint. It may be from a conference paper that you presented somewhere else that's on a USB key that somebody has found. I will check that out for you. Okay, now we've had a few plagiarism cases over the last few years, but I will check it out for you. So the most important thing is you need to do a good response to the reviewers, line by line to every query. Don't be rude, be polite. If they say something nice to you, say thank you. Thank you, isn't that right? If they say something mean, don't say, I completely disagree with you. Say, okay, or yes, but, and then explain why you've done it differently. Don't be rude. So the golden rule is submit to the correct journal. Paraphrase means write in your own words. It doesn't mean open the PDF of the paper and then copy the text in and use the thesaurus in Word. Okay? That's not actually paraphrasing. Work is evaluated on its merits. I don't care where you are in the world. I've published papers from the most obscure organisations. This is not life or death. I know it may feel like that when you're doing your PhD, but don't worry. Your supervisor, if you're that bad, will probably want to get rid of you anyway as quickly as possible and give you your PhD with the least amount of stress for himself or herself, okay? So it's not going to be the end of the world. And really, if you're struggling that much to finish your PhD and to publish, it's actually a reflection maybe more on you, okay, and the quality of the work you're doing. Now, you could have a shitty supervisor as well, okay, but it could be 50-50. It's not the end of the world unless you want to go into academia full-time. If you want to go working in the private sector, no one's going to ask you how many papers you published. Be collegiate to the editors, to the reviewers, and we'll be collegiate to you. Be professional, don't be a clown. So thank you for listening.
That was really great. By the way, thank you for particularly for the non-Jurassically flatulent life forms. That means the non-old farts. Non-old farts. Okay. Birol, you all loaded up and ready to go?
Yeah, I'm good, yeah.
Okay. Photons, appear, I command thee. Photons.
You have a minivan, do you, and a surfboard? You're like myself. I surf this way. I'm a surfer. This is my formal gear.
Exactly, I snowboard too. It's like,
Oh no, Irish people aren't made for snow. If you see an Irish person and there's snow, stay away. You'll end up breaking your leg or something, because we'll fall on top of you.
it's like snowboarding was invented. We got palm trees in Ireland too.
Oh, they're important.
We hope the Gulf Stream will keep going. Do we have a technical out? Maybe you want to go ahead and just start with the.
Okay. Right there, yeah. Okay, this is going to be on Journal of Natural Gas Science and Engineering, JNGSE. I've been, this is my third year in this journal. I was EIC for the petroleum part of it. There's another one, it's called JPSE, Journal of Petroleum Science and Engineering. Before that, I worked for another journal for Society of Petroleum Engineers. It's called Reservoir Evaluation and Engineering. So I'll show you some of the historical figures over here. But what I did when I was assigned as an EIC for this journal, I looked at the taxonomy or the scope document at the beginning. This journal was a mixed bag of anything you can name it, actually. They never said no to anything. I mean, you don't need to read the scope. We were publishing hardcore oil-related papers, etc., although we have an petroleum journal, a sister journal over here. And nobody looked at it. So what I did is first I rewrote the scope. And of course, whatever it was promised before myself, we honored those promises because there were some irrelevant papers that they were already approved for publication. So it was kind of painful. I didn't want to do it, but I mean, it's an establishment, so I didn't want to go against that. So we published that. Right now, it's clean. But of course, what happens is that it's still impacting us, although we have written and rewritten, and I'm also applying what's written. It's also application. You can write anything you want, but if you don't stick to the rules, it's useless. So we get a lot of manuscripts that they say, well, you have published this thing 3 years ago or 4 years ago, you know, how come you say no and all that kind of stuff. So that never ends. I'd say, well, this the cliche, under new management, you know. That's what I tell them. And just go and complain if you want. I mean, I care less about it. It's done, actually. Because it created all sorts of problems because we don't have wide spectrum of reviewers that has, you know, those kind of backgrounds, basically. I mean, we have a focus area. As a result, B- papers goes very easily, or C- papers, actually, if you accept anything that you want. And if you look at the main theme here, anything to do with natural gas resources, gas processing, plants, except hardcore chemical side of it, like synthesis and all those kind of things, they are out of scope. But anything in the subsurface, within the pipelines, processing plants, midstream, even certain elements in the refining section of it are in scope. So is CO2 sequestration. Because when we say gas, it's the expanded scope over here. Although there are other journals, but there are certain synergistic publications over here. Enhanced gas recovery is one of them. You can dump the gas that you don't like. You get gas that you want as energy source or a raw material, whatever the purpose is. So the journal metrics quickly, site score is 305, impact factor is 2.8. Of course, this journal is very specific. It's the, in terms of impact factor, is top one. It competes against Society of Petroleum Engineers journal. So in that landscape, we have the highest actually. It's not, you're not going to see 10 kind of numbers over here. And this is the progress of impact factor. As you see, there's steady increase over here. This is the time that I started actually around this time. But of course, there's a backlog of it. So right now, the estimate is much better than 2.03. This is estimate of 2018. It's 3.7 actually. So we are working on it. Cleaning up the scope and getting rid of all sorts of papers that intrinsically, just by looking at it, you know that it's, you use the word crap, so I can use also. It's just crap, basically. I mean, if you look at the dictionary, that's what it says actually about those papers. I've seen a lot of manuscripts that were basically company reports.
Biogas.
Somebody puts...
You could use the term biogas instead of crap. That would
Yeah, that would help. Yeah, biogas or biodegraded gas, that would be good. So we have seen quite a bit of people trying to push some company reports by putting an abstract on top of it. I mean, you take the abstract. I know, I mean, I've been in this business. I work on fluid properties quite a bit. And I look at it, this is a standard lab report. Somebody slaps a little intro page, and they think that, you know, what if it goes? You know, what if it flies? Then they start shopping between journals, of course, and you already highlighted this. You know, we have shoppers here. So the yearly publications, as you see here, this is less than a 10-year. We have about 11. I would say we are at the 11th year. Actually, it's a young journal with respect to anything else that you see. It's not as old as the journals that they were highlighted here. However, we have a tremendous progress. Of course, it lines up with the progress in the gas industry as well as unconventionals. But some of this increase here was artificial, actually, because this is the part of it is we accepted anything, basically. We did not stick to the rules of, I mean, people push business journals. They write business-related journals. It should go to HBR, Harvard Business Review, or other places. They write in some place hydrocarbon or oil or gas. They just push. So we basically took it out, and this is reaction to that one, because people are asking sometimes, how come it goes from 805 to 428? 805 comes from the momentum of 556. But of course, we promise, whatever we promise, we stick to that one. Then this is the natural number. Submitted articles, we have, you know, similar statistics. We have a lot of submissions from Asia, basically. And the others are, you know, well diverse. But of course, second biggest bar here is the North America. Let's see. This is region and country. Average speed. Our average speed, I mean, within the given workload of people and the state of the industry and the diversity of the papers. It's not, you know, there's room for improvement over here, but with respect to other journals within the same area, we are in a better shape. I am also associate editor for Society of Petroleum Engineers. We are much slower over here, but we need to accelerate it more. The problem is that we had a culture of revising 4 or 5 times. It clogs the entire system. It becomes inconsistent. You have different set of, and I told them, like, you know, we have to say yes or no at some point, actually. There has to be a cutoff over here. So I just stopped that culture. So of course, it starts giving fruit after a while. I mean, it's not an instant reaction because there are things in the system already. Like 80-20 rule, like 20% of the papers take 80% of the time, and probably you all are aware of it. You have to babysit people through emails and through their papers and arguments, etc. So we are stopping that one. So issues over here, similar issues probably. Also, I mean, I can write a book about if I combine all those things for these journals. I mean, you know, people's feelings getting hurt to getting psychological help to all sorts of things. I mean, because their paper is rejected, all sorts of made-up excuses, actually. And anyway, you have to be immune to those, and I don't engage for those kind of things. So we reduced unethical issues. And also, we had to let go some reviewers. We had people. Here's the problem. If you put performance indicators, and if you put a bunch of smart people, and if you assign them, these are the performance indicators for you, they will make sure that they'll hit them. If you tell people you have to write 5 papers a year to get a good review, they will write 5 papers for sure. Unless you bring the quality dimension here, right? That's hard to measure. Anybody can measure number of papers, right? You don't need people. But that's the culture that we have to deal with. We have also the behaviors over here, shoppers. They go journal shopping. They don't take the answer no. You are saying the same thing, actually. We are after that. I mean, you have to be like an agent over here at some times, which I hate doing it, but we have to penalize those people who are bad examples for us. There are a lot of positive things, but of course we have to stick to those because they can also ruin the reputation of a journal if people start seeing them in perpetuity. There's also culture. If you have a bunch of them, it becomes culture, because I get sometimes email, previous people before you, they did this. I said, I'm sorry, I'm not looking back. I don't know these people. I don't have any emotions plus or minus. This is different. That's me. And if you don't like it, Elsevier has all the levels that you can go all the way if you want. But it's not going to happen that way. So we had duplicate papers. You know, like the same paper is published in 2-3 places. It's nearly impossible to catch everything at all times, actually. But we react to those. We had reviewers, associate editors. They were telling people they have to cite their irrelevant papers, like you said. They have to be cited. It's a precondition for any paper to be published. Again, they go for this rating spree over here, right? You put a bunch of smart people. Some have a little twist of mind, I guess. So they run the system towards their goals over here because they want to increase their citations, basically. So then they challenge you sometimes. Well, I have this kind of citation numbers, and how can you say no to my paper? Well, I mean, it is possible. So I mean, these are pretty much it. Any other things are, we get light reviews. I guess we have the same thing, light review. This is a good paper, publish. Bad paper, don't publish. It means nothing to me. We have, let's see. Yeah, okay. We have also another thing is that you highlighted missing information is in the paper. There's no way to check by any means, actually. We have that kind of issue also. So we basically stop to those and you know, we react collectively, basically, on that thing as a team. Thank you. Done.
Okay. Thank you, Birol. Okay, last editor, are you all loaded with?
I hope I should be.
And then we'll do some of the roundtable questions.
All right, so I'll start quick. So I am Brandon, and I was invited here. I'm the only person who's a full-time editor. So when I was invited to give this talk, basically said you could talk about whatever you want, your journal, your editorial experience. I thought I would talk about my unique experience transitioning from someone who was a researcher to now a full-time editor. So a few years ago, I was a postdoc, and now I'm a professional editor. So let's talk a bit about that process. I will quickly introduce my journal. So I work at Cell Press. Cell Press has a bunch of journals. They're really famous for this journal called Cell. So Cell came out of MIT Press in 1974. And then eventually became independent in 1986 and became Cell Press. They've been a fairly famous life science publisher for quite some time. Today, Cell Press is about 22 research journals, some partner journals, and about 16 trends review journals. In the 2000s, it was bought by Elsevier. So it is now part of the Elsevier family. So I work for Joule. Joule is CellPress's flagship energy journal. It covers the entire field of energy, from solar cells, batteries, policy, economics, and then, of course, the important category, other energy, because we just couldn't think of all the different subcategories. So we cover pretty much everything. We launched in September 2017, making Joule the newest journal that we were talking about today. And we do monthly issues. And Joule's a very selective journal. It's designed to be the energy analog to the famous biojournal Cell. So we publish maybe about 7 to 10 research articles a month. And here's a bunch of our covers just because they look nice. So at Joule, we're looking for really outstanding research. We're not looking for novel research. Novel means new. If I painted myself green and was shirtless giving this talk right now, that would be pretty novel. It wouldn't be very valuable to the audience, probably a bit disturbing. But we look for things that we think have value and impact to a broad energy community and that are interesting and stand the test of time. We're looking for research that we think isn't just going to be the new flavor of the month, something that we think will have a lasting impact. So that's just the kind of stuff we look for Joule. That's what Joule is. I'm just going to quickly talk about my transition into an editor. So I figured also to be, postdocs and grad students in the audience. So this is me. I was a semiconductor device researcher, building solar cells, characterizing them, these kind of things. And at some point, I wanted out of the lab. I liked thinking about research. I liked talking about research. My sweaty hands in a glove box one day and was like, I'm done. I don't want to continue doing research. And I just looked for jobs that I thought were in science communication. I really like talking about research. I just like talking in general. And I enjoyed science communication, so I was looking for positions there. I always someone who preferred bigger picture over the details. I was always super excited to start my next project instead of digging into the details of the current one I was working on, just the type of person that I am. And I just enjoy meeting people. So when Joule launched, it was conveniently around the time when I was finishing up a postdoc, and everything aligned together, and here I am as an editor at Joule. So this transition was interesting. Being a full-time editor, you do so many things. There's no such thing as a typical day. I always get asked, what do you do? How does your day go about? So I decided I'd try and map it out. And I came up with this super complicated diagram that looks something like this, that I'm not going to go over in any amount of detail, but I would estimate that I spend about 25% of my time actually handling papers, sitting at my desk, reading papers, evaluating them, rejecting papers, giving revisions, all of these kind of things. I spend the vast majority of my time, and this is also a reflection of the fact that Joule is a new journal, in community engagement. I'm building a community around this journal. I'm trying to be a part of the energy community. So I spend most of my time just communicating with authors, email. After this meeting, I'll pick up my phone and I will see I have tons of email. I have messages on WeChat from authors asking me things. I spend time thinking about articles to commission, and I do quite a bit of traveling to try and meet energy researchers around the world and following up with them and things like this. I write articles, I do podcasts, and I just try and stay on top of the field. So I do a whole bunch of things, no such thing as a typical day. My typical day is 50 mini tasks, and yeah, it's challenging. So the good and the bad. The pros, lots of learning opportunities as an editor. I get to learn about so many different things. As a grad student, you know a lot about the thing that you're doing, but you really don't see the bigger picture until you start taking a step back. I get to travel quite a bit, which is always exciting. I get to bring joy and happiness to people sometimes. When I accept a paper, you get to really connect with authors, and you make them really happy, and that's a good feeling. I get to meet lots of people. It's a very flexible job. I can work pretty much anywhere in the world as long as I have my laptop. And it has some interesting career prospects I'll mention a bit later. Cons, the fun part. I'm always the bearer of bad news, unfortunately, especially I worked at a fairly selective journal. We reject over 90% of the papers. So if I think about most of my day is spent being bad news to people. It's kind of depressing. No more discovery. As a student or a scientist, you're making new discoveries. Now I read about the discoveries of other people. It's a different mind shift. Tight deadlines, and everything is urgent. Papers are urgent. Every time a new paper comes in, that's an urgent task you need to do. You need to handle it. You can't let it sit there. You have to get back to the authors. When reviewers are late, you're freaking out because this paper's been there for so long. There's so many things on your mind, and all of them are kind of urgent. And with many jobs in today's world, you are always drowning in endless emails. One of the most famous email auto reminders I ever saw was someone was on vacation, and they said, I sent them an email, and they got back to me with an auto reminder saying, I am on vacation. I will not be checking any emails. I won't be looking at the emails that you sent when I was gone. If you'd like to contact me about something, please email me again when I get back. And we live in this world with everyone's expected to be answering emails, and I think more people should start doing these kind of things. Okay, so my transition, there's a lot of differences that I found as a researcher. again, you're doing few bigger tasks. You're working on the things that, your few research projects. As an editor, you're doing many smaller tasks, as I kind of mentioned. Your knowledge in depth as a researcher, you get to go really in depth about the thing that you're doing, whereas an editor, you only have time to look at things from a higher level. Range of topics as a researcher, you might focus on the few things you're doing. As an editor, I cover everything. I was a solar cell researcher, but now I spend time. I was just at Bloomberg New Energy Finance in New York recently. I go to battery conferences. I try and cover the whole topic. And as a researcher, your social group is small, usually your lab. As an editor, my social group is just everywhere. Many people around the world. I'm constantly getting to meet people. And disappointment as a researcher is often brought to you. Your supervisor, this paper's garbage, or editors telling you things. As an editor, you start bringing disappointment to others, which is, it's unfortunate and it's harsh. Honestly, it's something that you don't ever take these decisions lightly. I was a researcher, and I know how it feels, and a lot of people's careers rely on this. It's a super important decision and a lot of responsibility, and it's something that no matter who you are, it's something you have to get used to, and you have to try and remain objective and always have the mind frame of the importance of your decisions that you're making. So just really last one, in case anyone's interested in a career as an editor or a full-time editor, there's a career advancement path becoming just within editorial. You can go become editor-in-chiefs, publishing directors, and all of these things. But in reality, what ends up happening more of the time is they take a job as an editor, as a full-time editor, and a lot of people go into different things. They go into consulting, policy, management. Some people go into journalism, different things. And people more advanced in companies, I often see go into a very high-level management research institute in companies and things like that. So there's some interesting prospects. So yeah, that was just my brief kind of different talk than what we've been hearing today about the life of a full-time editor. And thanks.
Okay, we've got just a few minutes. Does anybody have a burning question they want to ask, specifically or broadly our group? No? Okay, then I'm going to ask this question because I am really worried. I think a lot of us are that climate isn't dying, we're going to be dying. The last speaker was pretty good about what Kurt Vonnegut said. So the task I want to ask the editors is, what do you think about adding to your scope of the journal that in the conclusion section, we want you, if you're a theoretical person, to opine on how this might be used in a practical way. And if it's a very practical paper, make sure you discuss how to scale it to outside just your little nugget.
Okay, I'll go ahead and start. So actually, the kind of idea behind Joule and why it was launched was the need for bridging scales in energy research to try and communicate with people who are doing fundamental things and make them think about the impacts of their work to people who are doing applied things and the other way around. So I think there's a lot of lack of this across science broadly. So I would encourage everyone, the most important thing you can do with your work is think about its impacts at multiple scales. What are the messages to as many different groups of people as possible? Don't write papers for just experts in your field. Write papers for the general public, but write papers for people who might be working on devices that might try and use some of these insights, or the other way around. So I think there is a call to try and everyone should be working on something just for the sake of, shouldn't be working on something for the sake of getting a paper. There's a bigger picture thing that you need to think about as you prepare papers, so I think everyone should be very mindful as they prepare papers.
And those papers, which is what I'm looking for now. Larry, sort of when he was retiring, he lost his way for a bit, and I was only looking after wind papers, okay, so for the field of wind energy. And there would have been a lot of mistakes, the same as, so that's what he was looking for initially, and that's what I'm looking for as well. It's at multiple scales and interdisciplinary, you know. Think about what other people see in your paper. I think that's the most important thing, and that will then make impact.
Any other impact?
We look, it's not divided into applied or fundamental. Rather go back to what's your research question, what you are going to solve. And then you may use applied or need fundamental knowledge to solve this. So this is what I feel, is we don't really divide into applied. Even, of course, applied energy is very applied.
Birol, do you have any?
Yeah, we look at the integral aspect of these things, actually, and it becomes very interdisciplinary, similar to my colleagues' comments over here. So really, that's what we drive the process through, actually. Integrated bigger projects.
Any questions?
Something that's general. So your rejection rates, I noticed the way you were talking about it seemed like something of it's cool.
No, No, you'd be surprised at the really awful papers we get sent. And actually, it amazes me that a supervisor would let a student or, or a postdoc actually send that paper into somebody to be considered for publication. Because I would see better undergrad, final year, MEng, master's projects.
Yeah, I think it behooves us academics to not let our students submit something. I'll see what happens.
No.
I eviscerate my students before I let it go out because it looks bad on you. Me. Let me ask this question because I don't want to get into those kind of numbers. So I live in a rural part of New Hampshire. I commute by bus, so I don't poo too much carbon out. My neighbor is an auto body person. He is a savant. He can fix anything. He can't do math. And he asked me once, Alex, so what do you do down there at MIT? And so I gave him a copy of one of my papers to show what I do. And he looked at me and he's like, yeah, but what do you do? So I explained in kind of like just normal language. And he goes, so how about at the end of every paper, no matter how whatever, should be required to have a paragraph that would be printed in your local newspaper on what this paper is about? Would you all be willing to try that experiment, for example, and say, so I as an author could send my local newspaper, hey, here's this article I did on this. If you want to learn a lot of crazy math, go to the website. What would you guys respond? And would you guys all play that game?
Through, for example, if we use social media, like WeChat, and we have, that's for the more like a popular science.
Right, yeah, but could we have at the end of every real journal article
Unfortunately, so far, we don't have a journal that requires the author to submit for them like a half page more.
You do.
I will do it. I call it the layman's abstract.
Yeah. Maybe the lay life forms.
Or the lay person, because we have to be diverse now.
In Sweden, if you...
Okay, good. Will you add it now?
Yeah, will you?
Okay, so we have one editor.
We already do this. We require every author to publish something called context and scale. Provide context and what is the scale it operates for every single paper it gets accepted.
And you specifically say so it could go in your local town newspaper?
No, but we...
But let's try that.
Yeah, I understand, yeah. Yeah, and I think papers, I think the introduction of every paper should really not just be, here we're introducing the history of this specific problem. That's where you need to start thinking about the bigger picture. Start from very big. Pretend you are writing it for your local newspaper and start your introduction this way to set the stage and slowly work down into the specific problem you're trying to address. I would encourage everyone to do this.
Okay, and I want y'all as writers to please start doing this at the very end, discussions or whatever, and say, in layperson's terms, let's all do that to them and give them, and let's see what happens, because we heard that we got to communicate to normal people a lot better. Any more? Yes?
I love that point. It's fantastic. I just wanted to ask on the interdisciplinary aspect. So we've heard a lot, that is important. What I find is that, if you write a truly interdisciplinary paper where you maybe bridge social sciences and engineering, you actually sometimes have trouble to get that into journals because, they say, oh, this doesn't really fit, and it's challenging to find reviewers who are competent in both disciplines. So my question is, how do you address that to actually make interdisciplinary research, more publishable?
Let's hear from the experts here.
Yeah, we do this through a special issue, more like tests. If there's traditional people, always you have a scope, and then you have the export in. And then we try special issue through the guest editor. Maybe they have not in your field, but a little bit across to other. And then through such a way, we try to approach. And some very successful, and some is really another which is beyond my knowledge. I feel really out of control, but it's a test.
Yeah, so I think doing interdisciplinary research is really admirable, but I definitely see the challenge in trying to get it published somewhere. So I think that's a good home for broad scope journals to submit. They should be very welcoming of interdisciplinary research. And if I was doing that kind of research, especially with something that was done for the first time, we were bridging these communities to solve this issue, that's the type of thing I would write into my cover letter, to address why you needed to bridge these communities together, and only by combining these skill sets could we overcome this problem that we're reporting today. If any editor reading that would be like, this sounds very interesting. As long as it's within the scope of the journal, if it's a broad scope journal, they should consider it carefully.
Okay, you just said a key thing was the cover letter, which I don't think was touched on too much. Yeah, no. The cover letter is really important to do that, that's your chance to quote, talk to the editor about what you're doing and why they should be interested. So don't forget the good cover letter. And on your y'all's journals, do you have on the guide for authors the importance of the cover letter? That might be an important
I do, yeah.
issue to-
Yeah, there's something.
Where I alluded to that was where you're recommending your reviewers.
Okay.
Okay, so I'd have, you know, what's your contribution in this piece of work? Who is the readership, and why should we publish it? Okay, and then also who are the reviewers that you wish to recommend?
Okay, good. Yes, I already remember that.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm a trial PhD candidate at McGill University. I just want to go back to sort of this communication with lay people and paywalls. Necessary evil, or?
I'll bite this one. So yeah, I think science publishing is such an old, archaic process, and the systems we work with today were built a long time ago for various things, and pretty much every publishing company is realizing the demand for open access, and they are all doing things towards this. You can argue that they're making progress too slow or what, but all publishing companies are recognizing the importance of this, and they are all moving towards this goal. So Elsevier, for example, is launching, like most of the journals it's launching today are open access. So they recognize the need for this. And yeah, like Joule, for example, is only under a paywall for 1 year. Everything on the archive, anything older than 1 year, is open access forever. So there's compromises being made, and I think it's going to continue to go in that direction. Yeah.
In my journal, I can make a recommendation if a paper I think needs to get out there. We are not having, this journal isn't going to have, like Jerry had a side spin-off. And there's 2 or 3 of the other journals in our group. They all have spin-offs as well, but this journal is being left alone to do what it wishes. So they've given me free rein to do whatever I want. I'm not being forced into anything. But what I can do is if I think a paper was really interesting, I'll give it gold open access for the first 6 months. And that's actually when you reach most of the readership. And actually what will happen is the paper will just sort of filter out anyway. After that 6 months, there'll be a whole load of illegal copies floating around the planet. So, you know, I'm really not bothered about, like, you know, PDFs floating around. It doesn't really bother me. I've done, you know, I've borrowed plenty of PDFs in my day. So, you know, people email me about it. I'm in the lucky position. I'm part of the EPSRC in the UK. And it's they pay, so the Research Council in the UK pays for us to go open access as part of our publishing process. So when you get an EPSRC grant, it's automatically that you get a code and you input that code. So that's what's lucky about it in the UK system. I also worked in the Republic of Ireland, and it's not the same there because obviously they have budgetary constraints. They're a smaller country financially.
So I want to make a comment on that. I think you guys should have, you know, PayPal for $1 or something. Figure out, you know, a cheap way to pay, because I sit on a lot of promotion committees, and this impact factor drives me out of my tree, because then people go shopping. And I can say this because I have a happy H index, or whatever the number is. You know, I didn't even know what it was until about a year ago, actually, because I never gave a hoot. But what matters more, I think, in my field of I do a lot of real device design, is how many times my journal article is downloaded, because that means I write mostly for industry. That means industry people are downloading my journal to learn how to design the thingy. And they never cite my paper. But the downloads count, but on the other hand, I don't want someone to write a bot and download their own paper 1 million times, unless they want to pay $1 a piece. So I'm going to call the journals out on the $39.99 for a paper the layperson won't do, but they'll spend $1, you know, a Dunkin' Donuts coffee, or $1 or $2. So maybe try that as an intermediary thing. Please think about that, something simple. And then authorship, you should be telling authors a little index of how many times it was downloaded, and that way, when I'm in a promotion committee, I can say how many times is your paper downloaded, not how many times it was cited. I could give a hoot. So any other questions? Because we're out of time.
Yeah, real quick. I'm currently in graduate school, and I've helped my advisor prepare some proposals for grants. And I've noticed that the grants for very applied technologies require an economic analysis, just showing what the cost of the fuel or chemical would be. Do any of your journals, or do you know of any journals that require like a short economic analysis at the end for very applied technologies?
Some of the papers I get would have like a lot of economics, and actually would be from economists and engineers or scientists working together. But and we'd have people where they're looking at case studies, where they would be looking at, you know, the LCOE, the NPV, which is net present value, you know, the IRR, internal rate of returns, and things like that, because actually they're the sort of things that people are interested in, because the purpose of the journal is actually to reach out to all sectors, but predominantly, you know, industry and policymakers, and they're the questions that they always ask. So I've never seen any journal looking for it per se, but it just sort of, it naturally happens with a lot of the papers that come into this journal.
It's not required, at least.
No.
And if it is related to the abstract and the paper's title, yeah, it is required in that case.
Yeah, when I'm looking at a paper, I'm looking for something that gets me excited and interesting about the paper. And if it's an applied device and they've coupled that to some techno-economic analysis, that's just one extra thing that I see as a potential benefit that elevates this paper maybe against other papers that don't do that. They're not thinking about the commercial value of their work or the implications of it at scale.
Sure.
Yeah, if it's related to the application, of course, you might, if you are going to implement, but not necessarily, not required, so you have to include economic analysis.
There's one, can I add something there? There's one thing that I would think be very interesting, like the back of an envelope calculation, where, say, for example, now it was like computing, and we're all into this cloud computing. I don't know what they're all putting up in the cloud, it's just beyond me. But, you know, it's a lot of energy, okay? So to keep these huge data warehouses running all the time. So if somebody said, oh, I can improve the capacity or the, you know, the efficiency of the processor by 0.0001, and if I looked at a data center with whatever 2 gigabytes or 200 whatever gigabytes of data in Ireland, that would save energy in such and such. You could do a back of the envelope energy calculation, work out CO2 emissions for that country, you know. So that would be very interesting, you know, some interesting back of the envelope calculations.
Yeah, that was good. And I think the cost thing you brought up ties back into the kind of the first intro question of the balance of theoretical to applied and vice versa, right? Okay, we're out of time. I want to thank our editors. I'm sure that you can pigeonhole them if you want to afterwards. And thanks for good questions.